Welcome to NTD Newsroom. I'm Chris Beers. The prosecution in the Trump criminal trial takes a last stab at convincing the jury to convict the former president of falsifying business records. NTD's legal correspondent Arleen Richards has the latest. Out of the Trump trial, dueling press conferences, one featuring Biden supporter and actor Robert DeNiro. We'll tell you what both sides had to say. Former President Trump makes a surprising endorsement opposing a conservative chairman in Congress. Meanwhile, President Biden lays low in the political landscape. And we have an update on the Israel strike in Rafah that killed 2 Hamas leaders and several civilians. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley has the U.S. response. And Poland signs a $735 million contract with the U.S. to supply stealth cruise missiles. The deal comes as the country spends heavily on defense amid Russia's war in Ukraine. Breaking now, Hunter Biden's federal gun charge is moving forward. An appeals court rejected his lawyer's motion to dismiss. The U.S. District Court judge hearing the case had earlier rejected the motion as well. The appeals court said it lacked jurisdiction because the district court hasn't finished hearing the case. Generally, a defendant can't appeal until after a lower court issues its ruling. Hunter Biden's trial is set for June 3rd. The prosecution in the Trump criminal trial is in the middle of closing arguments to the jury. Earlier today, the defense cautioned the jury not to convict the former president based on the testimony of a proven liar. Our legal correspondent, Arleen Richards, has more.
After a lunch break, the tables turned in the Manhattan criminal trial against former President Trump as the prosecution followed the defense in making closing arguments. Prosecutors have the burden to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. They have up to 4.5 hours to seal the fate of the first former president to be criminally charged. Prosecutors reminded jurors of the bank statements, emails, and other documentary evidence they have viewed, as well as an audio recording between Michael Cohen and Trump. Cohen testified that they were talking about paying $150,000 to former Playboy model Karen McDougal to keep her quiet about an alleged affair. The defense said the recording wasn't complete, and it's not clear that the conversation was about the $150,000. Prosecutors are expected to tell the jury that the former president mislabeled ledgers of payments to Cohen as legal services to conceal the transaction with Stormy Daniels and to influence the 2016 election. They will make final efforts to convince the jury that there is enough evidence to convict Trump. Earlier this morning, Trump's lead attorney Todd Blanche delivered closing remarks for about 2.5 hours. He focused on the prosecution's star witness, Michael Cohen, who he said lies literally like an MVP of liars. Blanche said Cohen lied to Congress and even to his own family. In other remarks, the defense rejected testimony by former adult film actress Stormy Daniels that she had an affair with Trump. And he disputed the prosecution's argument that the $130,000 payment was part of an illegal scheme. Blanche told the jury that they have to decide whether or not Trump had anything to do with the way the payments to Cohen were booked on his personal ledger. Trump faces 34 counts of falsifying business records and up to 4 years in prison or probation for first offenders. It is unclear whether or not the defense will request jail time. Reporting from the criminal courthouse in Manhattan, Arleen Richards.
The Biden campaign has remained relatively quiet about the Trump trial. That all changed today. Outside of court, the Biden camp sent actor Robert De Niro to address the media about Trump's role on January 6th. At the same time, Trump supporters gathered across from De Niro, saying the Biden campaign is using desperate measures to win voters. NTD's Virginia Gibson has the story.
Famed actor Robert De Niro and 2 police officers who were on duty at the Capitol on January 6th spoke with reporters today. They didn't directly address the ongoing criminal case against the former president. Instead, DeNiro had some harsh words about congressional Republicans and Trump's role at the Capitol that day.
On January 6th, while Republican lawmakers despicably tried to keep the loser Trump, in the White House, and Trump-inspired insurrectionists stormed the Capitol, brave men and women from law enforcement put their lives on the line to defend this country, our democracy. They are the true heroes. These guys are the true heroes. They stood and put their lives on the line for these lowlives, for Trump.
Across from DeNiro, Trump campaign senior advisor Jason Miller fired back, saying the Biden camp is losing nationally, especially in key battleground states. He says the Biden campaign is using a washed-up actor to help win voters.
Last week, President Trump spoke in the Bronx, where he had over 25,000 people show up to rally around him. And the best the Biden campaign could do was put out a web video with Robert DeNiro. There is nothing behind the Biden campaign. Their numbers are in the toilet. Kamala Harris is a terrible alternative, and it's all an attempt to try to turn around the Biden campaign.
Miller also said the Biden news conference backs up Trump's argument that this trial and the others are politically motivated. Former D.C. police officer Michael Fanone and former Capitol police officer Harry Dunn spoke of their personal experiences on January 6th. Fanone talked about the injuries he suffered that day. Dunn, who ran unsuccessfully for office in Maryland, says America needs to wake up. Virginia Gibson, NTD News.
For more on Trump's trial, we're joined by NTD News contributor Mike Leon. He's the Policy and Strategy Director of the Free and Equal Elections Foundation and host of the news commentary podcast, Can We Please Talk? Mike, the Biden campaign is seeking media attention right outside this courthouse. Is this a good strategy?
Hey, Chris, good to see you first and foremost. You know, the strategy, I think you and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago when members of Congress and House Speaker Mike Johnson were outside the courthouse kind of doing this and going to bat for former President Trump. And I mentioned there, and I'll echo it again here, get back to D.C. and get back to work. Now, in this case, obviously, these are people that are private citizens. Obviously, Robert DeNiro is an actor. Harry Dunn and Michael Fanone don't work anymore for the Capitol Police Department, so they're free to do this. But it's an interesting strategy. But if you recall, the campaign manager for the Biden campaign actually said before all of this that the reason they were there is because the cameras were there. So they were trying to get attention. So they mentioned that at the start. But listen, the reason the cameras are there is because it's a former president of the United States that's on trial. So I have an issue with it because I had an issue with it when the Republicans did this and had members of Congress that are actually working going to the former president. Let this trial be adjudicated, and then we can go back and forth debating the issues as we get set for these debates coming up with the former president, the conventions, et cetera.
And speaking of adjudicating this trial, what's your prediction for the result of the trial?
Well, that's the $64,000 question, right, Chris? I mean, the one thing is for sure is that this trial has been very tough to cover for people that are not embedded in the courtroom. I had a current reporter that's covering this trial that has been there, for the last few weeks on my latest episode of my show. And so for people that are watching this on the outside, you don't really know what to make of tone, inflection of the jurors. There's no cameras in the court. Everything's kind of secondhand information that you're getting that the networks are kind of repeating out. So you don't know how, for example, the closing arguments are happening right now. We don't know how it's landing with the jury. Remember, it only takes one juror for this to go in the direction of former President Trump, or we could get, at worst, which a lot of people fear would be a hung jury, which is where the jury is just continuing to deliberate on this and they can't come to a verdict and they keep going back and forth with the judge saying that they can't come to an agreement on this. My prediction for this is, I think because the defense did so little and only called 2 witnesses, I think everything's kind of shaping up in their direction. Remember, the prosecution's case right now, Chris, shapes around Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen. And Michael Cohen already went to jail for a majority of this. And that are the 2 central witnesses. I think it was very tough for the prosecution to convince this jury, but we're going to see how it all plays out.
Okay, and switching gears to Trump's classified documents case, Special Counsel Jack Smith requested a gag order, but Judge Aileen Cannon today denied it. Tell us more about this order. Where did it come from?
Yeah, so this was in response, the special counsel put this in response because of what former President Trump had said about FBI agents going to Mar-a-Lago, and they had an order, to kill him, or at least there was people in the Trump orbit that were pushing out this message. So Jack Smith filed this motion before the weekend hit to try to put a gag order on the former president, and obviously Judge Cannon shot it down, but she said she would be open to something later on down the road if it rose to the level. She also threw out the defense's a motion to kind of, strike Jack Smith with respect to what he was trying to do here and kind of acting outside of the normal rules and regulations of the court practice here. So that was kind of at the core of why this came to be. But, the gag order is interesting because obviously we've seen what the gag order does in New York, and the former president has been fined for that, but it hasn't risen to the level of what this was, which was saying that FBI agents were sent there to kill him. But I think it's very interesting, and that case is another one to watch, as all of these other cases are that are involving the former president.
All right, Mike Leon, Policy and Strategy Director at the Free and Equal Elections Foundation and host of Can We Please Talk? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris, as always.
A surprising endorsement from former President Trump over the weekend. Meanwhile, President Biden keeps a distance from political candidates. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez has more on this story.
Former President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social on Tuesday lambasting House Freedom Caucus Chairman Congressman Bob Good and endorsing his GOP primary rival, John McGuire. Trump's social media post begins by stating in capital letters that Bob Good is bad for Virginia and bad for the U.S. The former president endorsed instead John McGuire, a Virginia state legislator and former Navy SEAL. Trump called him a true American hero. The endorsement comes as a surprise. 2 weeks ago, House Freedom Caucus Chairman Congressman Bob Good traveled to New York in support of former President Donald Trump, who's facing trial there.
This is a crooked sham trial to try to hurt the nominee who's going to be the president of the United States, whether or not they like it or whether or not they want that to happen. President Trump is going to be reelected.
Every House Freedom Caucus member who traveled with Chairman Good to New York in support of former President Donald Trump has received Trump's endorsement. Even Speaker of the House Mike Johnson received the former president's backing last Sunday. In a post in Truth Social, President Trump said he and Mike Johnson get along well and continue to work closely together. Former President Trump also said Mike Johnson has my complete and total endorsement. On the other hand, Democratic presidential candidate and current President Joe Biden has only endorsed 2 congressional hopefuls in the 2024 election cycle thus far, a stark contrast to the over 40 candidates Joe Biden endorsed in 2020, and of course in stark contrast of the over 90 candidates President Donald Trump has endorsed thus far in the election cycle 2024. Reporting from Washington, D.C., Luis Eduardo Martinez, NTD News.
And Israel is investigating its recent strike in Rafah that killed 2 Hamas leaders and several civilians. NTD's Washington correspondent Jack Bradley joins us from the State Department. Jack, what's the U.S. response to this matter?
Well, the U.S. is responding to this deadly Israeli airstrike in Rafah on a Hamas compound, with the State Department spokesman saying that it's a tragedy. But according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, about 45 civilians died in this strike. It also killed the Hamas chief of staff in the West Bank and another senior member of Hamas. Here's State Department spokesman Matthew Miller on this. Watch.
As we have said before, Israel has a right to go after the Hamas terrorists responsible for the cold-blooded murder of civilians, as appears to have been Israel's aim here, and Hamas should stop hiding behind civilians in Gaza. But Israel also has the obligation to do everything possible to minimize civilian harm as it carries out its operations. As soon as the United States saw reports of this incident, we reached out to the government of Israel to express our deep concern over what happened, ask for more information, and urge them to undertake a full investigation.
The Biden administration has threatened to withhold military shipments to Israel if Israel conducts a full-scale military operation in Rafah, but State Department spokesman Matthew Miller has said that Israel has not crossed that line. In Israeli military, they said that they did not intend to cause those civilian casualties. It was an accident, and that Israel said that it was the smallest bomb available to them to make a targeted attack. Here's an Israeli military spokesman on this. Watch.
As you can see, in our aerial surveillance from the time of the strike, we targeted a closed structure away from tent area. As you can see, there are no tents in the immediate vicinity of the structure that we targeted. Contrary to reports, we conducted the strike outside the area that we designated as a humanitarian area and called civilians to evacuate to. Our strike was over 1.5 kilometers away from the El Muasi humanitarian area.
As Israel is conducting this investigation into the matter, U.S. officials say that they're speaking to Israeli officials every day about carrying out these operations and minimizing civilian harm. Back to you.
Jack Bradley, thank you. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky continues his Europe trip. He met with the Prime Minister of Belgium today, signing a new arms deal. Zelensky commented on Western countries that don't allow Ukraine to use their weapons on targets in Russia.
We can see the places of arms. Even from reconnaissance, you get maps, satellite images. You see where they stand, but you cannot respond. I think it's unfair. But we cannot, and this is a fact, risk the support of partners.
Today's deal guarantees Ukraine about $1 billion worth of military aid from Belgium, including the delivery of 30 fighter jets. After the press conference, Zelensky visited a Belgium airbase. He was given a tour showcasing some F-16 fighter jets. Belgium hopes to deliver them before the end of this year. Also today, Poland's foreign minister talked about sending troops to Ukraine. He says his country should not rule out sending soldiers. Ukraine's Western allies have generally ruled out the possibility of sending soldiers to the country. And Portugal just agreed to provide at least 126 million euros worth of military support to Ukraine this year. Moving on, the U.S. is selling $735 million worth of missiles to Poland. The newly signed contract is for JASSM extended-range missiles. Warsaw has been spending heavily on defense amid Russia's war in Ukraine. Poland is spending around 4% of its gross domestic product on defense this year. Last week, it also reached an agreement with the U.S. for a $960 million aerospace reconnaissance system to monitor the northeastern borders. The JASSM-ER stealth cruise missile that carries a 1,000-pound warhead has a range of aircraft, can carry the air-to-ground weapon, including F-16 fighter jets and B-2 bombers. The missile has a range of more than 500 miles. When we come back, the Summer Olympics in Paris is just a few weeks away, and the potential protest by French residents is trending on social media. What the stink is all about when we return.
Water, nature's ultimate cleaner. We drink it, we bathe in it. Think water, think steam, think clean. Now harness the power of water with the H2O X5 5-in-1 steam cleaning system.
I'm so impressed with the X5. It's an all-in-one product. I can use it throughout my entire house.
It's cleaning, it's sanitizing. There's no chemicals in it. It's just steam.
This is unbelievable. There is no more odor.
You could spend over $500 to purchase the products that the X5 5-in-1 Miracle replaces. Order your H2O X5 steam cleaning system, a $500 value, for just 4 easy payments of $43. Order now and we'll upgrade your X5 package. We'll add a 6th mode with a dusting and polishing wand. Valued at over $30, this extra bonus attachment makes your H2O X5 the H2O X6. That means your 10-piece system becomes a 12-piece system at no extra cost to you. All for just 3 easy payments of $43. Call or click right now.
Imagine a coffee that cares for your health. Expertly fermented with a 50-enzyme complex to enhance flavor and remove bitterness. Small batch roasted to a decadent medium dark, resulting in a brew that is gentle on digestion, low acid, and up to 90% less caffeine than regular coffee. Try America's first enzyme fermented coffee today.
We are only 80 years removed from countries that killed 60 to 70 million people intentionally. And we have people being like, oh, it can't happen here. Yeah, it can, and it might.
These people, they're not interested in the facts. They're not interested in anything except crushing people that are in their way.
There needs to be a formal deprogramming of the cult members.
A strong church can stop this.
Shen Yun Creations, the streaming platform from Shen Yun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
Life doesn't always give you time to change the outcome. Prediabetes does. With early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the 1-minute prediabetes risk test today. Go to doihaveprediabetes.org.
Welcome back. A curious joke is viral on French social platforms with less than a month before the start of the Olympic Games. Some French residents are calling for using the bathroom in the River Seine. NTD's France correspondent David Vivez speaks to a City Hall council member about what's going on.
City Mayor Anne Hidalgo said she would swim in the river on June 23rd, allowing athletes to compete, then Paris residents to bath in certain portions of the Seine has been a promise by the French government and the City Hall, which have spent $1.3 billion to make it clean for that purpose. But as the Olympic Games draw closer, a trending hashtag invites Paris region residents to poop in the Seine as a backlash to the inconvenience caused by the Games for residents. Thousands of posts on social media show pictures, maps, or give timings for people to actually poop in the river. According to Paris City Council member Aurélien Véron, there might be strong motives behind the joke.
It's just a bit of humor from Parisians who can't take it anymore. They feel the City Hall relentlessly do everything they can to ruin the lives of Parisians.
Topics of discontent include the 7,000 ongoing construction projects in the capital, or the difficulty of traveling by car, as navigating the city will be a maze for many drivers.
In the short term, and very specifically in Paris, life is going to be very hard. It's already started to get very tough, with the closure of bridges, the Place de la Concorde, and other places that are very important for traffic flow. Parisians are the collateral victims of these games.
Despite some French feeling grumpy, tourists might have a good time visiting the French capital, Véron says, if they are ready to close their eyes to certain details.
The airport is a nightmare. Cabs don't work. But once they are in central Paris, on foot, you can go to Luxembourg, you can go to Montmartre, you can go to Le Marais, you can go to Concorde. It will be an easy life for tourists.
The Olympic Games opening ceremony will take place on June 26. David Vivez, NTD News, Paris.
The Biden administration is stepping up its efforts to upgrade America's electric grid. Here's NTD's Don Ma with today's Business Matters.
Thank you, Chris. The White House today announced steps to modernize a major roadblock to America's clean energy transformation, namely the nation's aging and inefficient electrical infrastructure. The new initiative between the federal government and 21 states aims to make faster fixes and improvements to the grid. There's also a commitment to building a bigger and more modern grid as part of an effort to reduce power outages and increase electrical transmission capacity. That lack of capacity is a massive hurdle to getting more clean energy on the grid. The news comes after thousands of customers in the Midwest and eastern U.S. were left without power after destructive severe weather over Memorial Day weekend. Now, weather-related electrical outages are on the rise as several storms put more pressure on outdated infrastructure. And it's coming at a critical time. Demand for electricity is set to spike in the coming years due to the dramatic rise in data centers and AI and demand from electric vehicles. Now, in other news, OpenAI has a new security board. Today, the company announced a new committee that will make recommendations about safety and security. CEO Sam Altman will lead the new committee along with board chair Brett Taylor and board member Nicole Seligman. This comes just weeks after the company dissolved a team focused on AI safety. It also follows the high-profile exits of two of the team's leaders who complained tensions, quote, reaching a breaking point earlier this month. A company spokesperson said dismantling the team would help it better achieve its super alignment goals. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you, Don. A Florida cop gives neighbors a chance to get way too close to a wild animal. Take a look.
Check out this gator that got loose in Georgia and one officer's offer to give it some affection.
If you want to pet it, you can pet it. If you do, make it quick though.
Pass on petting that thing, but thanks for the offer. Okay, how'd we get here? Cops say the ornery alligator was spotted wandering a neighborhood. The arriving officers were able to wrangle the rascal and get it under control. That's when one of the rescuers gave neighbors one last chance to scratch its scales.
If you want to pet it, you can pet it.
With seemingly no takers, the reptile made one last attempt at escape.
There he goes.
When it didn't work, the gator was loaded into the police car and taken to a nearby spot to be released back into the wild. Next, a stunning story of survival. A 19-year-old fell 400 feet below this bridge and lived. Crews say the man took a steep path underneath the structure and slipped, sliding all the way down to the river at the bottom. The Mason County Sheriff's Office in Washington State worked quickly, sending a harnessed firefighter down on a rope for the rescue. Crews hooked the teen up and hoisted him back up to safety. Incredibly, the teen only suffered minor injuries from the major fall, something rescuers say is a miracle.
There are more recoveries than there are rescues.
Thank you for watching NTD Newsroom. I'm Chris Beers. See you tomorrow.